All right. Good afternoon and good evening. Thank you so much for joining us today for our virtual reparations webinar and listening session brought to you by the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California and Community Health Councils. My name is Chris Lodson, and I am one of the lead organizers with the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California, or CJEC, which is a grassroots California-based coalition of organizations, associations, and really just regular Black folks, as we like to call ourselves, working for reparations and reparative justice right here in the state of California. Our organization, CJEC, helped write the final version of the California Reparations Task Force Bill, AB 3121, as well as SB 189, Section 14, which is the California Black Lineage Data Bill. We are one of the 7 anchor organizations to the California Reparations Task Force, and I am so excited for today's event, which will feature an introduction to California reparations, an esteemed reparations panel featuring leaders in the California reparations movement statewide, as well as specifically in the Los Angeles area, and community testimony from you. Be advised that today's webinar and listening session is also streaming live right now on YouTube at CJEC's YouTube channel. And today's listening session and webinar also features interpretation, both in American Sign Language and Spanish. To access our interpreters, please do check out the interpretation channels for the Spanish, the English to Spanish interpretation, and we have our American Sign Language interpreter who is on the screen on one of our videos, so you can have the American Sign Language interpretation for you there as well. So appreciate you all again for joining us. I want to get us right into today's program and actually hand the mic over to our really awesome partners at CHC, Community Health Councils, to talk about some of the amazing work that they do and some of the objectives of today's webinar. And then we'll get right back into the rest of the program. Following that will be our introduction to reparations. So to talk about CHC's amazing work and their amazing partnership here with CJEC, I am very, very happy to bring up Dr. Michelle Burton, who is Deputy CEO at CHC. Dr. Burton, hello, welcome, and please do tell us about CHC.
Well, thank you, Chris. And I'll be honest, I'm so excited about the webinar today that my remarks are very much squarely about the conversation today. Community Health Councils is, of course, a 30-year-old organization that is steeped in social justice and advancing equity. We were born out of the uprisings of 1992 to respond to the great need in our community. And this conversation today is very much in alignment with who we are and why we were founded. And so, you know, compensation, restitution, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantees of non-repetition. These are the 5 forms of reparations that the esteemed members of the California Reparations Task Force are considering. The Coalition for a Just and Equitable California is a vehicle for our voices. It is a call to action to unite around a debt that has long been owed to the descendants of slavery in this country. If you have not had an opportunity to read From Here to Equality by William Darity and Kirsten Mullen, I greatly encourage you to purchase and consume every page of this book at your. It is without a doubt one of the most comprehensive accounts of how descendants of slavery in the United States have been consistently deprived of the ability to build and accumulate wealth as fully recognized citizens in these United States of America. I want to thank each and every member of the Task Force on Reparations for their historic participation in a centuries-old debate on if, how, and when descendants of slavery will be compensated for what many may call irreparable damage done to our communities, now, then, and for the foreseeable future, unless, as Darity and Mullen have reminded us, we change the trajectory of this path, choosing a road that leads to a more just and fair America. Today, Community Health Councils is excited to co-host this rare opportunity to have an audience with some of our most respected leaders, scholars, and activists. Dr. Jovan Scott Lewis, Friday Jones, Jan Williams, and Chris Lodgson. Without further ado, it is my great pleasure, Chris, to welcome, these brothers and sisters in arms to further engage us in one of the most important discussions of our time. And again, it is our great honor to partner with you to co-host this and to further this very, very critical conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Burton. I couldn't have said it better myself, to be honest with you. That was an amazing, I think, overview and introduction to California reparations, and obviously to the work that CJEC is doing and CHC is doing and folks all across the state are doing. So having said that, I'm actually going to jump right into the introduction to reparations, and then after that, take us into our panel discussion and talk to some of these amazing reparations leaders, as you mentioned, Dr. Jovan Scott Lewis, Friday Jones, and Jan Williams. So let's talk about the California Reparations Task Force first, and let's get people and catch people up to where we are with California reparations and what's going on now here in the state of California. So in 2020, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed what would become the nation's first reparations task force bill. That piece of legislation was written by then Assembly Member Shirley Weber, now Secretary of State, Dr. Shirley Weber. And the task force is known as the California Task Force to Study and Develop Reparations Proposals for African Americans. I usually start this part of our introductions by asking people to just stop where they are, take a minute, and understand where we are in the process of California reparations. California is the first state to do a reparations task force, and each one of us is sitting and living inside of a history book right now. They will be reading, they will be writing, they will be talking about what we are doing now for California reparations for generations to come. And so each one of us who's here today, take a minute, stop, and recognize where you are and where we are in the history of California reparations. Each one of us is a part of that history. The California Reparations Task Force to study and develop reparations proposals for African Americans has 2 years from the days of its first meeting. So 2 years from June of 2021, which is when the task force started meeting, to complete its job. And its job has 3 parts. The first job of the California Reparations Task Force is to study reparations. The second job is to educate the California public about reparations. And the third job is to actually create a reparations plan here in the state of California. The California Reparations Task Force has 9 members, and we're very, very lucky and very, very honored to be joined by one of the 9 members of the California Reparations Task Force today. The task force has by law to hold 10 public hearings and has added to itself 12 additional community listening sessions. One of those you are attending right now. Meet your California Reparations Task Force. So as I mentioned, one of the members of the task force is here today and will be featured on our panel. That is Dr. Javon Scott Lewis. The other task force members include Chair of the task force, Camilla Moore, Vice Chair of the task force, Dr. Amos C. Brown, Senator Stephen Bradford, Assembly Member Reginald Jones Sawyer, Council Member Monica Montgomery Stepp, Dr. Cheryl Grills, Attorney Lisa Holder, and Attorney Donald Tamaki. So we're going to say the word reparations a lot today, and we're going to hear from you about what you think reparations are. But when we're talking about reparations today, we have a specific meaning and we have a specific idea of what reparations are and what they're not. When we're talking about reparations today, we're talking about corrective, substantive actions taken by a government to make right a wrong done. Usually by paying money and helping those who have been wronged. But what are not reparations? So things that are not reparations include benefits, programs, services, rights, protections that are universal or for everyone or for all people. Usually when we're talking about reparations, we're talking about something specific to a specific group of people. And also, when we're talking about reparations, we're usually not talking about equity programs. Equity programs are different than reparations. Reparations may have an equity effect, meaning it may increase equity, but there is a difference between reparations and equity. Reparations for who? Specifically, reparations in the state of California, according to the California Reparations Task Force itself, are for African Americans who are descendants of persons enslaved in the United States, also the so-called American freedmen, and also free Blacks in the United States before 1900. But reparations for what? Specifically, the California Reparations Task Force is tasked with designing reparations for U.S. slavery, for the period after U.S. slavery, the so-called Jim Crow era, and for ongoing discrimination. The California Reparations Task Force is by law required to create reparations that agree with 5 internationally accepted forms of reparations, and they are compensation, restitution, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantees of non-repetition, as was mentioned by Dr. Michelle Burton in her opening statement. So that's a little bit about the California Reparations Task Force, a little bit about what we mean when we say the words reparations. Let's get into our panel discussion with some of the leaders in the state reparations movement and also leaders in the reparations work and community work that's going on in and around Los Angeles. I am very, very pleased to welcome to the discussion some amazing, very, very esteemed people doing some amazing and very, very awesome work. Today's panel will feature Dr. Javon Scott Lewis of the California Reparations Task Force, Friday Jones of the Los Angeles Reparations Advisory Commission, and Jan Williams of Downtown Crenshaw Rising. I'm going to do a quick bio and then we're going to get right into the conversation. Just keep in mind, if you have questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A feature and channel and post your questions in the chat if you're here in the Zoom. If you are watching on YouTube, please do type your comments in the chat on YouTube, and we'll do our best to get to your questions and comments as well. Dr. Javon Scott Lewis is a member of the California Reparations Task Force. He is also an associate professor at the University of California, Berkeley, where he conducts research in racial capitalism, underdevelopment, and radical terms of repair in the Caribbean and the United States. He is also the author of Scammers Yard and the crime of Black repair in Jamaica and Violent Utopia, which traces the consequences of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. Friday Jones, also known as Kansa Muhammad Jones, is the vice chairperson of the Los Angeles Reparations Advisory Commission, where she advocates for a pilot reparations program targeted at the Black community within the city of Los Angeles. She is also the co-chair of the Los Angeles chapter of the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants and author of the self-help memoir, The Real Friday Jones. Last but certainly not least, Jan Williams. Jan is a board member for Downtown Crenshaw Rising. The organization's main objective is to identify strategies to acquire the Crenshaw Mall and make it a true community-centered development. She is also a Los Angeles native who is committed to fighting for a better life for Black people in and around the city of Los Angeles, reflected in her advocacy for improving education outcomes, housing justice, workers' rights, and economic inclusion, and ending state-sanctioned violence. All right. I'm going to start our panel discussion with Dr. Javon Scott Lewis. And Dr. Lewis, I want to start with you first and ask if you could just, as briefly as you can, recap for us the first year of the California Reparations Task Force. For those who don't know, the California Reparations Task Force is in its first year or just completed its first year of work. And so if you could, Dr. Lewis, recap for us the California Reparations Task Force first year. Specifically, what are some of the biggest successes and challenges? And if you can, talk a little bit about the first report released by the California Reparations Task Force.
Thank you, Chris. First of all, thank you to CJEC and CHC for having me here this evening. Dr. Burton, Chris, thank you for the wonderful introductions. I feel like the job is done. You've said it all. But to recap the first year, it's actually a big ask. It was a very busy year. Chris mentioned that the task force had 10 meetings or was supposed to have 10 meetings. That was written into the law, AB 3121. However, when all is said and done, the task force will have met 18 times. And not only did we meet these extended number of times, but we extended what were supposed to be 1-day meetings into 2-day meetings. So what we have are really 10 days of meetings of the task force that, when all is said and done, right, will become something like 36 days of meeting over the 2 years. And so I share that just to show, one, the commitment of the task force members, and two, just how seriously we are in fact taking this work that does require, considerable time and consideration. And we are working very diligently to bring, about what will be a first in the nation, proposal on reparations. And I think what that looked like was really taking account. Right? The first year was taking an account of many of the injuries and the harms that the Black American community in California, as well as United States, generally always knew to be true. But we had to do the really careful and considerate work of taking witness and expert testimony. And so what we did was, for the first 9 or so meetings, 8 meetings, what we did was we heard accounts of the experiences of mass incarceration, housing and job discrimination, environmental and infrastructural harms. All of that kind of came to, to this kind of culminating, object known as a preliminary report that we, released in June of this year. And so in the report, if one were to visit the report, which I really encourage folks to do, you don't have to read the 500 pages. I'd encourage you to do, one or both of two things. One, Chris is doing a very diligent job of leading a reading group. I think it's on Twitter, that's going through the report, and that's really an important resource. But also there's an executive summary that's about 30 or so pages that should be fairly easy enough to get through over a couple of days. But what the report details is a history of enslavement, racial terror, political disenfranchisement, segregation in housing and education. Right. Again, the effects of racism in the experiences with the environment and infrastructure. We're talking about neighborhoods here. We're talking about, toxic communities as a result of the deindustrialization of the neighborhoods and communities that many Black Americans worked and lived in and continue, in fact, to live in, despite increasing gentrification threatening their security of housing. And we're also, of course, dealing with that insecurity around housing. The report deals with the issues of the injustices in the legal system. Again, mass incarceration, over policing, dealing with the actual pathologization of the Black American family in this country, and how, in fact, that representation and misrepresentation was used to justify so many of the harms that the Black American family and the community that it works to comprise actually continue to suffer. And importantly, the report talks about the seemingly insurmountable racial wealth gap that Black Americans experience in this country, and especially in this state, and for which really reparations are needed to overcome. And so what we did was we kind of took testimony over this first year around all of those issues, and those issues and the testimony show up in this 500-page report. One of the critical things that we did that, again, was required by AB 3121, which is that we define the community of eligibility. And that's what we did in our March meeting of this first year. And so what we're going to be doing is, moving forward, is we are going to be actually getting to the hard work of devising the reparations proposals. What we have is an economics team comprised of Sandy Darity, who Dr. Burton mentioned earlier, as well as Kirsten Mullen and a team of economists and public policy specialists that are effectively working on tabulating the costs, of those harms, but importantly, the cost of the benefits, right, to a predominantly white American California society, and in fact benefited from the Black American harms that we have detailed over this past year. And so if we're going to answer the question about what some of the biggest successes are, it is one, making the case plain. Right. I think, for Black Americans, you live and you grow with this history. You live and you grow with the very real knowledge of these facts. And the challenge is that the kind of continued dispossession and the deferral of justice has largely been facilitated by the outright ignoring and denial of these facts. And now we have them in black and white. Now we have them backed up by research. Now we have them backed up by the recorded testimony of witnesses and of individuals who continue to experience these harms. So I think the preliminary report on one hand is a massive success. Personally, I think one of the other biggest successes is in fact defining this community of eligibility. And there are a couple of reasons why that is important to me. As an academic of Blackness, of Black studies, there is always a question about, well, what is Blackness? How does Blackness operate? And what we do is we tend to simply, we simplify it, to the experience of anti-Blackness. And in that process, right, we deny Black American communities, claims to a legacy, claims to a heritage, claims to geography. And this is something that I think that, a part of attending to these 5 areas that you mentioned earlier, Chris, in your introduction, that reparations must, accomplish. What it must also do is it must also bring about this sense of recognition. And so, that's one of the things that I think that what we've accomplished so far in the task force over this past year is bring about this sense of recognition for the Black American community in California. And I actually do think, in the country overall. The challenge is also the same. Right, we hotly debated, the terms around this recognition, and thankfully in the end, I think we came out with the right result, and I think this is the result that is, in fact, supported and advocated by many grassroots organizations, and one that I think, when you think about the kind of global movements for Black liberation, is one that actually comports with the expectations and demands of global movements for recognition and liberation. So for me, the biggest challenge was that I have always expected that there will be what we might think of as some kind of public resistance, right? I mean, again, we have to understand that the benefits to the United States and to the state of California, as it concerns the experience and the process and the practice and the policies of anti-Blackness, have always been to deny Black Americans justice. Right, the economic system literally could not have worked in this country, right? If it worked, if there was somehow some principle of recognition and of justice. And so, I think today we are still going to be seeing, that historical challenge. However, what the report lays out is the fact that not only was it just the government, the state, that perpetrated, right, and reproduced these kinds of systemic harms, also scores of private citizens, right, whether through complicity or active engagement. We're talking about lynch mobs, the Klan, etc., or realtors, right, who actively, dispossessed Black Americans of their homes. What we will see is that there is still a contemporary case to be made for reparations in this country. And I think what would need to happen is that we will have to make that case very clear. This is not simply a historical phenomenon. This is an ongoing issue, which is why I think, the wording was brilliantly put in AB 3121, which is this issue of the lingering effects. Right? We talk about long COVID, we talk about all of these kinds of lingering consequences that we really readily recognize in this country, but we have to also recognize the lingering effects of Black American enslavement in the United States, even if it shows up in a so-called free state like California. And the report also effectively disabuses the assumption that somehow California was not complicit in the reproduction and the sustenance of the practice of slavery elsewhere in the country. So this, is the challenge, is to communicate. But like I say, and I'm going to run out of time, is that we are dealing with 2 issues here. On one hand, for the Black American community, we are dealing with a matter of redress. And for the rest of the folks, right, we are dealing with the question of address. We have to address you. You have to understand what the case for reparations is about and how it is, in fact, a universal responsibility for United States citizens and residents of California to take seriously if we are to take, really, genuinely, any hope for any kind of future of justice.
Thank you for that, Dr. Lewis. I really, really appreciate that. That was, it's an amazing response because there's so much in this first report, as you mentioned. And I actually want to take it to our next panelist here. I actually want to go to Jan Williams. I said, Jan, I'm going to come to you. And I actually want to So Jan, you're doing a lot of great work in Los Angeles and in the Los Angeles area and around. I want to ask you, Jan, if you could talk about and describe your work first with Downtown Crenshaw Rising.
Man, Chris, putting me after Dr. Lewis. Dr. Lewis said it all. I don't know what to say after that. My mind is sitting here blown. Thank you for your work. I appreciate it, Dr. Lewis, the honesty and everything that you shared with us. With the work that we're doing with Downtown Crenshaw. So Downtown Crenshaw is an organization that came together in April of 2020 when we learned that the Crenshaw Mall was for sale, was up for sale. But previously, we were an organization called Liberty Community Land Trust, who were organizing to create community land trusts in our community in Los Angeles. So, which is an effort to push back against gentrification and sustain community for Black folks here in Los Angeles. The LA County Board of Supervisors had granted about $14 million to community land trusts. And Liberty is one of 5 of the organizations who were granted that money. And basically community land trusts, basically what we're doing is like if folks are in danger of losing their home to foreclosure, are looking to sell their house, we're able to take that property, get the property and keep folks housed in the property, create this community land trust. In some instances, we're able to convert a single family home into a multifamily home to make it more affordable for the folks who live there. Downtown Crenshaw came together, like I said, when we learned that the mall was for sale and say, you know what, we need to get that property. That's going to be our 40 acres in our mall, and we're going to keep that for Los Angeles, for Black folks in the Crenshaw district. What ended up happening, though, is that there are these gentrifiers, these billionaire real estate developers who wanted to take the property and basically create $900,000 townhomes in a community where the median income is about $40,000 a year. So if the annual income in this community is about $40,000 and your objective is to create housing that's cost nearly $1 million to live there, then you're saying we're not building this for the people who live here, right? And so it was a development that definitely would have pushed, continue to push Black folks out. So we organized, it became pretty much international news of what was going on. We were able to raise about $100 million of philanthropic dollars, like white folks' guilty money. You know, white folks wanted to, rent some of that blood off their hands. And so we were able to get folks donated the money for us to purchase the mall. We submitted actually the highest bid to purchase the mall. And 3 times we were rejected because of them basically the folks not wanting to let Black folks have that much power and control in our own community. One of the things that we also learned in the process is that a lot of these gentrification projects are being funded by our own dollars because it's actually pension funds that owned the mall. And so it was LA County workers and LA City workers whose pension funds were actually invested in the mall, and it's their funds who are working to push them out of the communities that they live in. So we were able to push back a couple of the developers, but at the current time, the mall has been awarded to I almost called him a developer by the name of David Schwartzman, but but we do have lawsuits pending, so there's no project that's able to move forward currently. But that's kind of a synopsis. And so what we're doing right now, because not everybody wanted all of their money back, we have been able to acquire a few other properties around in the Leimert Park area currently. So that's what we're doing right now.
Thank you so much, Jen. Actually, Jen, I'm actually going to do a quick follow-up with you here, because the California Reparations Task Force actually has in a couple of its key recommendations in its first report, it talks about things like, for example, supporting community land trusts. It also talks about estimating the cost of the land and property stolen and destroyed in California Black businesses, and then redistributing that back to California Black businesses and California Black entrepreneurs. When you hear recommendations like that, what's your reaction to recommendations like that, as someone who does community land trust work, as someone who does work to support Black business and Black entrepreneurship, particularly in the Crenshaw area, but also in Los Angeles?
That sounds like a great proposal. Currently, the median home price in LA County is about $855,000. So, you know, it's high to live out here. It's really expensive to live out here. Me, myself, I can't afford to purchase or own a home in the community that I live in. So, in my opinion, I could use some help with that. So redistributing that money. I know that, you know, growing up here in Los Angeles, there used to be a lot of Black owned businesses that are really hard to find now. So seeing a study of how much money was actually taken away, taken from Black folks. And I'm not sure if I answered the question, but what's coming to my mind right now is that Bruce's Beach, the folks, was it the Bruce family, where they had their property turned back over to them, right? But I think originally they said the land was valued at like $75 million, but then it ended up getting watered down to a lot less than that, I'll say. And then they did a lease agreement with the city where they're giving the lease back to the county for like $400,000 a year, the family is, and that's not even close to $75 million, the lease that they sold. So even in a situation like that, where the money was transferred to this family, they still didn't get the correct economic value of that land.
Thank you for that, Jan. That actually brings me to Commissioner Jones, Friday Jones. Friday, I'm gonna turn the questions over to you here. And first, if you could, Friday, describe for us or talk to us a little bit about the Los Angeles Reparations Advisory Commission. So just describe for us, if you could, the scope and the work of the commission. And then I want to talk to you a little bit more about some of the differences and similarities between what you're doing at the city level and what's going on at the state level. But first, talk to us a little bit about just the scope and the work of the commission that you vice chair.
Sure. So first of all, thank you for creating this space. I'm here with Jan, who I love, and Dr. Jovan Scott Lewis, who has been like one of the most staunch advocates that we could have as a descendant community. So I just am blessed to be like in their presence tonight. The LA Commission. So it's a blue ribbon commission that was formed by Mayor Garcetti using his executive powers as the mayor. The blue ribbon allows the commission to have more flexibility than some other commissions. We are not Brown acted. We are not subject to Bagley-Keene, which the AB 3121 commission is subject to, which has pros and cons. We saw in the beginning some of the administrative lifting that was done by the AB 3121 panel. And to be very honest, it's been a year's worth of administrative listing, learning in terms of how the city works. We were formed in June and we've already crossed the year. And when I tell you it's been all administrative, you know, working with the city attorneys, figuring out our own bylaws, what we can and cannot do, figuring out what the RFPs need to look like for our partners, which we are responsible for having an educational partner, just like the state has Bunch Center as at UCLA as its educational partner. What did we want that to look like? We are also tasked with finding private as well as public dollars for what is essentially going to be a pilot program. And none of the commissioners like the term pilot program for some of the reasons that you stated in terms of what reparations is and is not, right? A pilot program and services that may have been denied to a community that has historically been a Black community is not necessarily reparations. And as a reparationist, as someone who is not just the vice chair for LA's Reparations Commission, being someone who runs a national reparations organization and co-chairs locally here in Los Angeles with our local chapter of the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants, I'm very aware of this as we go through our process. However, we have bylaws that have language, and that is what the language dictates in terms of the bylaws. So one of the things that I'm glad that we were able to pull out of our bylaws is if you say, well, we have to go get private funding for what is supposed to be a reparations program, then I want a landscape analysis. I want to understand how has prior reparatory acts, whether it be the Japanese Act, whether it be indigenous acts, whether it be Germany, with regards to the Holocaust. I want to understand South Africa, right? And how did that government fund whatever reparatory work went into things after 1994 when apartheid, was dismantled there. I want to understand how the acts of repair have been funded previously. I want to know in terms of private foundations, who is doing the work now. And so we were able to tweak the RFP to expand beyond just an academic partner who can do analysis in terms of what the city has historically done, what past laws may have existed since the charter for the city, and the city of LA was chartered in 1925. We have a 7-member task force. 4 members, including myself, were chosen by Mayor Garcetti. The other 3 were chosen by the city council members, I think in CD 8, 9, and 10, which would be Marquise Harris Dawson. 9 is Curran Price, and no, 8 is Marquise, 9 is Curran Price, and then 10 was formerly what is his name? Jam, what's his name? He's been set aside.
Yeah, either Herb Wesson or Mark Ridley Thomas.
Mark Ridley Thomas. So okay. Thank you. The third one was appointed by Mark Ridley Thomas. And we really do have a strong grouping. We have an attorney, Virgil Roberts, who is amazing. And he really does push the city attorneys a little further because he brings that legal mind to the table. We have some educators, which is great. The educators, I think, bring the same level of vigor that we see with Dr. Jovan Scott Lewis. And then, we have some folks like me who are in the reparation space, and it helps. The panel is working together. We started our public interface with CJEC and with NAASD Los Angeles with our Juneteenth efforts with that hearing, the hearing was one day, but we had 2 days worth of programming And now we're going to get into the public more deeply. We're going to open up with a survey. We kind of want to hear from Angelenos in terms of the things they want. And we, thanks to that Juneteenth hearing, we heard from the unincorporated areas of Los Angeles whose governance falls under the county, right? So now we have a state that has a reparations effort going. We have the city of Los Angeles who has a reparations effort going, and we potentially might need to bring the county to the table so that there is not duplication of services, but so that people are also not left out when their services do not come from the city itself. So that's what we've been up to for the past year. It has been a tremendous learning experience, and thank God we have the state task force to look at so that I can say, hey, this is what happened at the state level. This is what I recommend we do, you know, so that we don't have the same number of hiccups. But it has really been a pleasure to be in a state that is leading the way, because it informs all the other counties. We're not, I think not San Francisco, Sacramento, I think, has a task force. So what the state is doing is informing the other municipalities. And I think that that is really a good thing. And as the saying goes, as California goes, so does the nation. I hope the folks who have really been working for the past 30 years on HR 40 take insight from what is happening here, because I do believe lineage repair ultimately is the way to go.
Thank you for that, Friday. Actually, so I was going to follow up, but you actually answered the follow-ups in your question. So actually, thank you for that. You know, you also talked about what some of the similarities and differences are, not just at the city and municipal and state level, but also, you know, just toward the end of your answer that you also talked about what's going on at the federal level too. So I appreciate you for that. I actually want to open it up to just some general questions for the entire panel, and then take some questions from our audience. I see we have some questions in our Q&A, and then also I see we have some questions in our YouTube live. Also, by the way, this is streaming live on YouTube right now at CJEC's YouTube channel. So make sure you like and subscribe to the CJEC YouTube channel and catch the replay of this on YouTube. So first question to the entire panel, and then, you know, we'll see who wants to take this one first. Where would the money for reparations come from? Where's the money coming from? At the state level, let's say. Where's the state level reparations money coming from? Anybody want to take this to start? Dr. Lewis.
Sure. You know, so I think, you know, first and foremost, you know, we are talking about state culpability with the task force, right? We are starting there. And so, you know, the state is the first answer. I think what we will be doing over the next several months is actually, you know, trying to work out, you know, some of these, you know, and disclaimer, I'm speaking for myself. I am not permitted to speak on behalf of the California State Reparations Task Force. Okay. So what I think needs to be understood is, you know, I mentioned earlier these public and private partnerships that were part of the histories and ongoing experiences of dispossession, right? We are talking about, you know, Jan, you know, gave a perfect example of, you know, an ongoing issue where here is a community, right, trying to do, right, the work of self-development, has gone away and done the hard work of garnering support and, right, capital to pursue a project, and it has been denied, right? In the task force, we heard accounts of a family here in Northern California, in Marin, who were discriminated against in the home appraisal process, right? I have a very good friend who's also a professor at Johns Hopkins, whose, you know, personal experience with discrimination in home appraisals, you know, landed in the New York Times this week, right? Where his family, right, had a home that was appraised at $400,000, and once he whitewashed his home, right? The home was then reappraised for $700,000. He had a white colleague from Johns Hopkins, meet the appraiser at the home. So you're talking about the literal cost of racism being, in that instance, $300,000 to $400,000. These are things that we can put in we could put it in QuickBooks, right? Like, this is what we're talking about. And so we have to think about how money actually works in the state of California. And so we would be remiss to think that there is a simple and straightforward answer like the state, right? And so for me, the money comes from the state, but the state operates, right? Not just as a public entity, right? Or through public relations, but through a whole host of private relations as well. We're talking about contracts, we're talking about all kinds of things. And so it stands to reason that money should be coming from private sources as well at the end of the day. Absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. I want to open up. Does anyone else on the panel? Friday looks like you wanted to jump in. Jump on it.
Yeah. So, we know Evanston took cannabis revenue, and I don't know like what the projections are for cannabis within the state in terms of sales tax revenue. And I don't want to limit it to any one particular industry, because to Dr. Jovan Scott Lewis's point, the real estate industry was involved, and there is a cost. We have medical, what I would call neglect and malpractice. I heard the interview that you did with Tavis Smiley, with the doctor who was on for the first hour, and how she used the term medical neglect and the cost that it has economically, I think, within the Black community in terms of decreased mortality, in terms of out-of-pocket costs, because situations wind up becoming emergency level as opposed to just being something that could have been treatable had the patients been doctored properly. And so I think in terms of institution and private business here within the state, this is a state that deals in oil. This is a state that deals in the farming industry. We have a tech hub in Northern and Southern California. And so I think in terms of industries where and we have, finance also happens in this state as well in terms of banking. I think, Senator Bradford mentioned on Juneteenth, like, oh, we could just take 1% of the state's budget and allocate it. That's over $100 million because our state budget is so robust. Making a universal decision like that to just give a percentage of California's, general revenues makes sense to me. Looking at how businesses that participated, manufacturing businesses participated. We have read the color of law, and we saw what happened with the car manufacturing industry. I think that also probably happened with the aerospace industry, which California is known for. We could, those institutions, including the insurance companies, right? They could pay some sort of, into a fund that also generates new revenue in addition to allocating the existing revenue. I think that the state really could be creative in this space. And I think they have a responsibility to be creative because this state has the fifth, it toggles between fifth and sixth largest economy in the world, not just within the United States. And when you're dealing with that kind of economic power, there comes responsibility with that kind of economic power.
Super dope. Jan, you got any thoughts? Where should the money come from?
Yeah, all of, I definitely co-sign everything shared by Dr. Lewis and Friday Jones. And then when we look at the prison industrial complex, how much money, California has invested in over-policing and criminalizing Black folks, at one point, California was number 1 in prison spending, but number 46 in public school spending. And that was a statistic from just about, just about 5 years ago. Here in Los Angeles, LAPD gets 54% of the general budget. So 54% of our general budget is going into criminalizing the behaviors of Black folks. You know, how many years have folks' lives been stolen, you know, away for possessing and using marijuana, while now all these white folks are, you know, becoming millionaires and billionaires off the cannabis industry, right? But folks' lives can't be returned that way. You know, so I would also like to see some of that money coming from a disinvestment in the prison system. If you have folks who are incarcerated, I mean, to make a phone call costs so much, you know, those are private industry companies that are making money off of that. You know, a pack of Top Ramen that costs about 25 cents, you know, a pack, you know, at the grocery store, they're selling them for over $1. You know, when you look at the price of prison labor, we heard about how the firefighters, they have these firefighters who are incarcerated, who are getting paid $1 a day, but when they get out of prison, these are jobs they don't have access to, you know. So I would like to see some of that money coming from a divestment in the criminal system and policing, and investing into repairing Black lives.
I appreciate that, Jan. I'm actually gonna follow up. So I'm gonna give you one more question from our question, and then I'm gonna take one or two questions from our audience, because we have some dope questions in the audience. Hey, yep. What's
Can
up,
I
Tony?
just interject based on something Jan said? So Jan really spoke to issues specific to the city, right? LAPD is specific to the city. I think that when it comes to the city, and we're in a precarious state because we are coming up on elections and the mayor is going to change, right? And so you got to now hope that you get a mayor who's going to be as committed as Mayor Garcetti was in the formation of LA's task force. And I have to do what Dr. Jovan Scott Lewis did. I'm now speaking in terms of my personal thoughts. I have to put the disclaimer out there so that I don't get in trouble with Capri Maddox, whose department our task force falls under. But when it comes to the city and when it comes to financing, the city, you know, also has a general fund. The city, DWP, LA Unified School District, they have separate budgets that are separate from the general fund, right? So when you look at the different departments of the city, even if you just look at the cannabis legislation, and here's where we get into the county-city differential also. So the prison system, like the Superior Court is a state system, but the county deals with the sheriffs. The county deals with the prison systems that are within LA County. And so the budgets, if you will, even for reparative justice, potentially could come from different places, depending on where the governance is. And so I think, you know, when we have these discussions, particularly around municipalities, I think municipalities are going to have to decide, do they want 54% of their budget still going to the policing? And if we were to do a look back, because the city of LA at one time, like of its 3,000 police officers, like all of them were members of the KKK. And so when we try to say, okay, what is the repair for something like that? And then where does the money come from for something like that? Well, if your whole police force was part of the KKK and that over policing and that overspending in the Black community has resulted in wealth differential, has manifested in health differentials, then the money has to come from where it was spent. Part of our job is going to have to be doing some sort of look back to see if we can quantify it. But I think that there are going to be departments that might choke at some of the recommendations that might come out based on whatever the pathology has been for the municipality of the city of Los Angeles.
And Chris, can I just say exactly, Friday, you know, like exactly. And I think, you know, a straightforward way to think about it is that we have to follow the injuries, right? It's important to remember, and I said it earlier, I think, but slavery was an economic institution, right? It wasn't just done because Negroes were just hated, and you know what I mean. It was done because there was an economic incentive. It was an economic industry, and so what you see is that behind every single injury that Black Americans face in this country, is effectively an economic incentive. Every mass incarceration, right? Economic incentive. Gentrification, economic incentive, right? The fact that industries rise and industries go away without concern for the Black American communities that they attracted and then they later dispossess, right, is about economic incentive. And so I think, once you begin to follow the injuries, you will inevitably land in somebody's accounting books, right? And what that means is that you follow it where it goes. And so I think, everybody should be put on notice, right? Absolutely.
Thank you both for that. And thank you all for that, actually. I'm actually going to jump right into the questions from our audiences. We have two audiences. We have a Zoom audience. Appreciate everybody for being here in the Zoom webinar. Also, we got a YouTube audience. Shout out to everybody watching on YouTube right now. Also, we'll take one or two questions from our audience. Let's make this a lightning round if we can. Actually, I'm going to start with our Zoom audience here first. The question is from an anonymous attendee. That's totally fine. Is there a documentary in the works to help explain the California reparations report and show the testimony? So I actually can answer that very, very quickly. There is no documentary in the works to help explain the report yet, although there are some amazing reparations documentaries in the works. I'm speaking about the Reparations Now documentary being produced by ETM Media Group. Follow ETM Media Group on YouTube for more information about the reparations documentary. But in the reparations report that is out now, by the way, on the California Reparations website and also on the CJEC website, the report does feature stories and testimony from folks who have actually testified to the California Reparations Task Force. So anonymous attendee, hope that answers your question. Again, no documentary in the works specifically on the report yet. There are some reparations documentaries in the works, broadly speaking, on the California reparations effort, particularly that being done by ETM Media Group. And the reparations report itself does feature testimony from folks who testified to the Reparations Commission. I'll get to some other questions here from our Zoom audience, and then I want to get to some of the questions from our YouTube audience. Actually, this is a question. This is actually a statement, but I want to turn it into a question because it's actually really, really interesting, particularly around the question of eligibility for reparations. Not so much the community of eligibility, and sort of what the task force has already decided, but specifically around residency. And so this comes from Monica. Monica says, quote, "There should be special restitution for ancestors of those enslaved in the state of California, of which my family members are a part. We know that there was an informal system of slavery in California, and my family has census records and documents to prove it." So I believe the question that we can pull out of that is, what about folks who are not living in California, who are descendants of U.S. slavery, but who maybe were born in California, who left, or who are descendants of those who were enslaved in the state of California? What say us on the question of residency and eligibility for reparations? What about residency eligibility?
Okay, so that's a slightly complicated question to answer because I can't give away stuff that we're going to hopefully be discussing in the meetings in the near future. But I would try and give what I can. On the straight question of residency, this is something that we discussed in the task force, and we basically ended up taking guidance from Secretary of State Shirley Weber, right, who helped author this bill. And her response was basically California residency, right? However that is established. And I remember early on in the process, I wanted us to try and be a bit more precise. When does, eligibility begin? When might it end? If it ends, that kind of thing. But what I will say is that, I am on the advisory panel, think of it as a subcommittee for the kind of economic planning around the reparations proposal. So basically, I'm working with Dr. Sandy Darity and Kristen Mullen and the team on working out, how to basically calculate the costs. And in that, we are discussing. I'm trying to be very delicate here with my language. Effectively, think of it as a further system of qualification. Here are, say, for example, a dozen injuries, right? One, you've established the baseline criterion of being, right, the descendant of an enslaved person in this country, right? Black person in this country. Second, think about gentrification. Have you experienced, right? Or have you experienced the injury of gentrification? And then basically you can go through the line that way. And so what that would effectively do in principle, and I'm not saying that this is the plan because I can't say that yet. We haven't begun to meet and debate these ideas, but these are part of the ideas that basically you would go through and further refine, right, and further define, right, the areas of experience that would, I think, in principle, account for this kind of very particular, family history. And so that's as much as I can say about that. But on the general criterion of California residency, we effectively were given the instruction or the guidance, really, that it was just California residency, how it is normally determined.
Thank you for that, Dr. Lewis. I'm actually going to go to one of our YouTube questions here. Looks like Friday, you might have something to say on this, though, before I go.
Yes, and I'm going to, because this is supposed to be lightning, I pulled out my timer to help me stay on track here.
Thank you.
So, I feel for the commissioners in this regard. I think, and I gave testimony, America and Black folks in particular, Black folks from the South, are some of the most nomadic people that have lived in this country, right? The Great Migration got its name for a reason. And the period, the time span for the Great Migration, I think is something like 1930 to 1970. So that's like 40 years worth of people migrating out of the South. I think that is significant. I think that when you talk about municipalities, including states, having to look at a residency qualifier, I think it is almost dangerous in a way to say we're going to start disqualifying people because you weren't from our state, because now you're re-injuring people. And so for the person who asked the question, I empathize and I wholly sympathize with that, being that we are having the discussion in the state of California. But I think that states have to also try to not do more harm, if that makes any sense.
And that's why we need federal reparations.
That part.
So I want to go to one of the questions from our YouTube chat here, and then I'm going to come back to the questions from our Zoom group. And by the way, we're going to, after the panel, get to your thoughts, your ideas. We were actually extending the panel a little bit here because we've got so many amazing thoughts and amazing ideas. And hopefully you appreciate being able to actually speak to and speak directly with California reparations leaders, members of the California Reparations Task Force, folks working on the ground in and around LA, and also folks on the LA Reparations Advisory Committee. So we're going to extend the panel a little bit here, but don't worry, hang on, sit tight. We will get to your thoughts, your testimony very, very shortly. Let's take two more questions, one from our YouTube and then one from here in the Zoom webinar. So this is from OG Mods in the YouTube chat. Shout out to OG Mods. The question is, has the Reparations Committee discuss the school to prison pipeline on how a lot of the schools are still segregated by zip code and wealth. So has the school to prison pipeline come up in discussions with the California Reparations Task Force?
Yes, actually, that was one of the topics that we addressed in our first in-person meeting in April. And actually, if you go way back to one of the very early meetings of the task force, we began to talk about that relationship as well. But we had a panel on it in April. So I strongly encourage you to go back to the videos to the April meeting and take a look.
Right on. And by the way, you can see the meeting stream live. The recordings of the meetings of the California Reparations Task Force are available on the California Reparations Task Force website. The website is www.oag.gov/AB3121. And then click the meetings button when you get there. Friday, were you also trying to jump in on this?
Yeah, I would also encourage people to look at the report because K through 12 was specifically drafted in the report. And I would encourage people to hone in on that and give feedback, now to the Reparations Task Force via email, so that if there was something missed, if there's something that makes sense to you, if there are pilot programs or parent-teacher, supplemental programs that are happening in your child's school that are working, this is the time to add. In particular to that K through 12 to knock that pipeline down.
Dope, as usual. All right, let's go to our Zoom webinar questions here. This one comes from Lene Norwood. Hey, Lene. The question is, reparations is a fight against white supremacy. What is your plan to unite with other Black groups who are also fighting for reparations, but opinions differ or have differing opinions about lineage or about the community of eligibility? So what is your plan to unite with other Black groups? Roddy is jumping out her seat for this one. So what is your plan to unite with other Black groups? And then I actually have a follow-up to this also.
So I almost want to flip the conversation and what are other Black groups doing to hear from the descendants? And I'm flipping it with purpose because I have I have four grandparents. Of my four grandparents, three are from the descendant community. My grandmother is part Shinnecock Nation, indigenous, and my great grandfather is from Barbados, right? So and this is before I get to the white people, because there's some white people and almost all Black Americans. There's some white people. So just putting the white folks to the side for right now. My great grandfather came here in 1924. The ex-slave pension group, we know Callie House, we celebrate her, have been successful in Congress, and the descendants have been addressed in real time when there were 400,000 ex-slaves petitioning Congress, a racist white supremacist Congress. My great-grandfather would not have been entitled. My great-grandmother would not have been entitled. And so I think that it's incumbent upon other organizations to understand our folklore, to understand our stories, to understand that I don't just have one grandparent that migrated in the great migration. There was a migration of 10 siblings from the South in the 1930s. And then my grandmother migrated in a second wave. There are people who left their children to be raised by other family members. I think that there is some truth and reconciliation and healing that has to happen, and some of what we see play out on social media is absolutely inappropriate. I think there are some olive branches that need to be extended to organizations, particularly descendant-led organizations. And I'm going to say this, I think there's a misnomer that the descendant organizations do not have international ties. I spoke with a chief in Ghana, from Ghana, and we talked about Ghana's news report. I think it was last week or the week before, where the president of Ghana basically said he thought that the nation of Ghana should receive reparations, and they supported reparations for Black Americans. And in my talking to the relationship that I have, the relationship was about the kin bonds that were broken, and about the fact that there are different clans and ethnicities. My father's people comes from the Bamileke people, who were kind of squished between Benin and the Fulani people. And would I like to reconnect potentially with them? Absolutely, yes. But if there's a repair to be done, I don't know about these governments as they have been formed. I think that there is healing and bridge work to be done from me, the descendant of the Bamileke people, and the Bamileke people. And it might be Benin owes restitution to the Bamileke clan as well as to the descendant that's over here. We haven't had those conversations because a lot of the descendant-led organizations haven't been asked to have the conversations. There has been mislabeling of who people are and how people think without discussions of asking how we think. So I would encourage, and Lene, I know exactly who you are. You've done Black voting registration. You're a phenomenal organizer. I would encourage those organizations to not talk to necessarily Pan-Africanists who come from the generation of the 60s, because Pan-Africanism was largely developed in the United States. That is a train of thought and it has its place. I would encourage organizations to actually reach out to descendant-led organizations to understand what we think an international repair might look like.
All right, Friday. Other thoughts on this question, Jan, Dr. Lewis, and then I have a quick follow-up, and then again, we're extending the panel here because it's a really good conversation. So Jan, Dr. Lewis, any thoughts you want to add?
Go ahead, Jan. Is it you all right? Okay. Yeah. I think, I mentioned recognition earlier, and I think, in the politics of Black solidarity, there is a question of needing to come together, right, in fighting, some kind of shared enemy or what have you. But there's also the separate concern of understanding who we are on our own terms, right? And I said earlier, that's what reparations is also meant to do. And so, I agree with Friday, right? That there is a question to be asked, right? Which is, what are your associations? Who do you recognize as your kin, right? What are the bases for your identity? And what we know is that, Friday talked about migration, right, of Black Americans in this country. And we could go back, right? We can go back before the Great Migration. We could go back to, Black American migration following the failure of Reconstruction, right? I wrote a book about Oklahoma, about Tulsa, Oklahoma, right? And the truth is that, Black Americans were fleeing the South, right, former plantations, and going to Indian territory, right, and staking out new lives for themselves, right, and they were defining on their own terms in that moment. And we're talking about, right, in the late 1870s, right, early 1880s. They were in fact in Kansas before they even got to Oklahoma, right? So you're talking about from the mid 1870s, you have Black Americans who have decided to, recreate the terms of their existence in this land. And that doesn't discount the fact that, historically you've had Black Americans who wanted, right, to, make a connection with the continent of Africa, right, through relocation, what we might consider relocation. But at the same time, right, there has been universal recognition of the distinctiveness of these ethnic identities, right? You have Liberia, you have Sierra Leone, you have, pockets of African-American communities in Canada, right? These are, indisputable facts of geographic, Black American communities that have shown up, but there is still an ethnic heritage, right, in each of these instances that we have to recognize as being discrete. I am an advocate of a lineage-based reparations because as a Jamaican, I know what it means to come from a country and to come from a people that has been determined, by their own imagination of what they want to be. And, the idea that we would deny Black Americans this right, which, despite the colonial histories in the Caribbean and West Africa, these Black populations in these places have enjoyed, it is another form of injury. I took my son home to Jamaica for the first time this summer, and I was able to show him his people on our money. The fact that in Jamaica, we have Nanny the Maroon, right, on our money. We have Marcus Garvey on our money, right? We have Paul Bogle. We have all manner of abolitionists on our money. That is a heritage, right? And African Americans, Black Americans, right, that come from this soil here in this place. And just so you know, I'm in the United States. I know Zoom, I could be anywhere, but no, I'm here in Berkeley. Right, there is a heritage there that we have to recognize if we're going to have anything like a universal Black politics. And I'm a Pan-Africanist because I believe in universal Black liberation, right? But I do not believe in the universal qualification of Blackness. We all come from a place and we all have a heritage, and these heritages are unique, they're beautiful, and they can be shared and celebrated, but they don't have to be flattened. That is the work of white supremacy, which is to flatten us. Right? They flattened us, our ancestors, and put us in ships like sardines. It's the same kind of flattening that occurs today when we have to be the same thing, right? And so, I think that is another injury that we have to not do to ourselves, right? And so therefore, yes, reach out and facilitate collaboration, right? And work towards mutual liberation. That was what the foundation of Pan-Africanism was. It wasn't about creating some kind of flat, homogenous notion of Black identity. It never has been that, and it shouldn't be that going forward.
Thank you both for that. I'm actually going to follow up with a follow-up question here, and then I'm going to try to wrap us up by the top of the hour here. But so this actually was one of the questions that we actually sent to you, is very much related, but I actually want to expand it outside of the question specifically about the different Black subgroups, and so and what we think about that. But what about, why should people who are not Black at all care about or support this effort for reparations? Why should people who are Latino, who are AAPI, who are Jewish, who are white, why should they care and they support this effort for reparations here in the state of California? Anyone want to take a stab at that?
Can I just give you a very quick answer? So for folks in the Bay Area, if you step foot on Bay Area Rapid Transit, known as BART, you should care about reparations, because the very healthy and very functioning Black community of South Berkeley was raised so that you could go to work every day on BART for the development of Ashby BART Station. Right? In 1970s, the Black community of South Berkeley and its commercial district, now understood as the Adeline Corridor, was raised for the construction of Ashby BART Station. So if you step foot on the BART to go to your job at Salesforce Tower, if you step on a BART to come to school at UC Berkeley, you should care about reparations, because, again, reparations is not just about the harms or injuries faced, right, or exercised against Black Americans, but how those injuries and harms were used to facilitate the benefits of the remaining society. And that is what we're talking about. That is the relationship.
So, other thoughts?
Yeah, one thing that I have said publicly, and I will say it in this space, and again, this is my personal opinion, I do not like entertaining the moral argument for reparations. I think that slavery was immoral. I think the Red Summer was immoral. I think, lynchings are moral. I think burning people out of their homes, and then once they're gone, making those homes into lakes is immoral. I think the what I call slavery in its essence is super capitalism with no rules. So it's immoral and it's all economic. And I think that for Citibank and Dr. Darity has thrown rocks at the Citibank study that tried to quantify the cost of racism in the last 20 years. You can read the report. It's a public report that Citibank published. I think that if you understand how racism, anti-Blackness, white supremacy effectively hold back our economy as a nation, not just as California, as a nation, I think that any American in their righteous mind, any American that has come here for all that America might have to offer, for all of its benefits, for, you can come here and you can, if you do your best and you work hard, you can achieve. Imagine people working hard and no matter what they do, they don't achieve, or they achieve for a time span until white supremacy smacks them back down to the starting line again. I think that it is important for the economic, social, the mental health of this country, the society itself that we want to build to live to that American ideal, that if we want to do that, there's no way you get to a better America, if you will, a better country, a country that really lives up to its constitution without repairing Black folks who literally, just came from nothing after 1865. It's about the economics for me.
And actually, I want to double follow up on this, and then we'll end the panel here. I actually want to ask Jan about this too, because Jan, I know you've had to do this in practice, right? You've actually had to do this in LA for the particular project that you've been working on in downtown Crenshaw. How were you able to convince people who were not Black to help support the effort that you were doing in downtown Crenshaw?
Thank you, Chris. It wasn't me. It wasn't just me. We have some great fundraisers, the president, Nikki O'Cook and Damian Goodman. And like I said, at this time, this was a time when a lot of white folks had a lot of guilt, and they wanted to do some good with their money. And so they were being very generous. So it wasn't me. I obviously didn't do it by myself, but and with the Downtown Crenshaw project, although it's Black centered and Black led, it benefits the community as a whole. So there were a lot of other folks who are not Black, who are still benefiting, who donated to the movement and benefit from the work that we're doing. For instance, in one of the properties that we've been able to acquire as far as an apartment building, some of the tenants in there, they're not all Black tenants. We can't discriminate that way and just say we're only helping Black folks, right? So when we're able to do it, when we had other people have been able to benefit from our work. And then to answer kind of like your other question about why should other folks support reparations. Everybody else has benefited off of our struggle. Everybody has benefited off the intentional failure Black folks in this country. And there's that saying that says when Black folks get free, we'll all get free. When things get better for us, it ends up getting better for other people as well. So that's my thoughts on that.
Thank you, Jan. I thought it was important to hear from somebody who's actually having to do this in real time. I think we're all, at some stage of doing this in real time ourselves as well. So that's going to conclude our panel. Okay, I want to thank our panelists actually for an amazing discussion, an amazing conversation. We extended the conversation. I want to appreciate all the folks who are watching both here in the Zoom webinar and also who are watching on the YouTube. Appreciate you so much for staying for the extended panel. An amazing discussion with some amazing thought leaders and people doing some amazing community work, community leaders here in the state of California, both statewide and in and around the city of Los Angeles. If you have more questions and we weren't able to get to your questions, don't worry. You'll probably get a follow-up email from us in the next day or so anyway, asking for you to share any questions that you have with us that didn't get answered today directly to you. And also, feel free to reach out to us directly at cjecofficial@gmail.com. Also visit our website, cjecofficial.org. Sign up for our newsletter. Get your California reparations information and updates from us on a regular basis. And again, submit your questions to us directly via email, and we'll make sure we get back to you rather. So, all right, we're not done. I want to thank our esteemed panelists. I want to show you some extra flowers and some extra appreciation. Jan Williams of Downtown Crenshaw Rising, Consa Friday Jones of the LA Reparations Advisory Committee, Vice Chair, and then also, of course, Dr. Javon Scott Lewis of the California Reparations Task Force. Much, much appreciated to each and every single one of you. Stick around if you can, because we are going to now hear from folks in our community itself. For the folks watching, really we want to, and actually I'm gonna see if I can make a change here and actually extend our community listening part of this conversation for another hour, because I think we need as much time as possible to hear from as many of the folks in our community as possible. This is a community listening session. So having said that, if you would like to give testimony today, we ask that you use the raise your hand button. So hit that raise hand button. If you need any help raising your hand, message one of our co-hosts, and they'll get you some help on how to raise your hand, and we'll bring you up as a panelist. So when you see the prompt or the choice to come up as a panelist, please do say yes. And then we're gonna unmute you and let you give your community testimony. We have some questions, a series of questions that we actually want your thoughts on, and you can answer one or all of the questions. You'll have 3 minutes for your testimony, and your responses to these questions will be included in a report to the California Reparations Task Force that is being produced by the UCLA Bunch Center. Shout out to the UCLA Bunch Center researchers for doing your amazing work as usual. So I'm gonna, I see some hands already going up, so that's really, really dope. What I'm gonna do is first, I'm gonna share the prompts and share the questions that we wanna hear some thoughts on. And then bring up our first guest to actually speak on what their thoughts are. So let's see what we are looking for to hear from you. Let's take a look together. So the first of the things that we are very much interested in is, first, when and why did your Black family come to the state of California? So when and why did your Black family come to the state of California? Secondly, in order to repair the harm, we have to acknowledge the harm. So what are the one or two harms to you, your family, and or your community that you want to see reparations acknowledge here in the state of California? So what are the harms to you that you want reparations to address? Also, as you think about some of these harms, how would you want to see reparations, policies, and practices developed and implemented in a way that would and could help Black people in California heal and thrive? And last but not least, what will it look like, sound like, feel like for California to be a place where Black people can heal and thrive? I sometimes ask this question in a different way. So I usually say, let's do a quick experiment, right? Let's snap our fingers All right, now we have reparations. What does it look like outside your window? What does it feel like? What does it smell like outside? What's different about your community? So these are the questions that we are very much interested in. Take a few seconds to think about what your thoughts are about these questions as we get to some of our folks who have raised their hand to give some of their testimony and their comments. So the first person we're going to bring up to talk to help answer these questions is Monica. We're going to bring you up. So Monica, you should be seeing an option to become a panelist right now. Click yes, Monica, and come on up, and I'm going to hit the unmute for you. And then Monica, or you can hit the unmute yourself. And Monica, please tell us what your thoughts are on any or all of the questions that we have asked today. So Monica, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, hey.
I don't know if you can see my video. I hope not, because I didn't do my hair today.
No worries.
So my name is Monica, and on my mom's side, my aunt has done 20 years of genealogy for our family, and we found out that our first ancestor was brought to California, to Santa Clara County, and ended up in El Dorado County around 1850. She showed up in the 1850 census with people who enslaved her enslaver. And how we know this is because she came over, her owner was a Mormon and stopped over at the Mormon temple. And if anybody knows anything about the Mormons, they keep wonderful records of history. And she was a child about 10 years old. And she showed up in the census records. California did an 1852 census, I believe, and she showed up there again. And there's different moments where they're trying to water down. She's listed as, the people that she was with were all listed as slaves, and she was later listed as a servant, so on and so forth. And so our history started and has been continuous since then. I think that harm of having family members who were enslaved in California is one of the number one harms. Number two is the period of gentrification that actually drove out some of my family members in recent history. So it would be really sad to have this policy move forward and people who have been born and raised in California and moved 3 years ago or 5 years ago, or, you know, during the period of gentrification, if they couldn't benefit from this policy. I also know that Black women take on the majority of student loan debt than any other group. So I think student loan forgiveness, the ability to buy a home, whether that's in California or other parts of the country. And I also think that people who have generationally not had the finances, this is probably already included, but having free financial counseling for people who are going to inherit, you know, perhaps, you know, a lot more money that they've ever seen in their lifetimes. We want people to know what to do with these kind of benefits. Were there any other questions I missed? I have 1 minute left. Like I said, we have about 7 or 8 generations in California, and I just want all of my family to benefit from this policy. I will provide any testimony needed or any paperwork that is needed. And I just want I want the laws. What was so important about the reparations report was all of the policies that California needs to implement on top of the payment to liberate Black Americans in California. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Monica. And actually, you asked, if there were other questions. I just wanted to in the time that you have left, and sort of ask if you have any thoughts on what will it look like for you and to you after reparations. So what does your community look like after reparations?
I would like Black Americans to be able to go to school. They just made, UC Berkeley just opened up free tuition for Native American students, which they absolutely deserve. People to be able to have their debt canceled, people to be able to get loans and start businesses, people to be able to have down payments on homes wherever in the country they want to live. And that kind of financial freedom, I'm sure, and also the policies that are going to protect Black Americans from the harms. Many of them were recommended in the report. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you, Monica. Thank you as you know, as someone who has some lived experience. We really, really appreciate you. We're going to bring up our next speaker here, and I'm going to tell you what the queue is. So for the folks who raise their hands, I'll tell you what order you're coming up in. And as you can see, we have a timer on the screen. So we're giving you about 3 minutes or so ish, you know, and so just keep that in mind. But we definitely want to hear as much from you as we can. If we're not able to get to you today, don't worry, you're going to have some links popped in the chat sometime today for you to give your own testimony directly to the California Reparations Task Force, specifically through the UCLA Bunn Center, which is taking individual personal testimonies right now and through, I believe, next week, August 31st. You're also going to see a link to a California Reparations survey that you can take and share your thoughts with the California Reparations Task Force also. So don't worry, if we're not able to get to you today, don't worry. We want to make sure that you know how you can talk to the task force directly also. There's other ways too, but let's get to our next speaker. We're going to bring up, and this is the order. So we're going to go to Lene, then we're going to go to Tariq, then we're going to go to Cynthia after that. So Lene, I'm going to bring you up, and you should see a message that says promote to panelists now. Please say yes to that when you see it. And then, what are your thoughts on the questions that we have today? When and why did your family come to California? What are the 1 to 2 harms that you want Californians reparations to address? What does it look like and feel like for California to be a place after reparations that Black folks can heal and thrive? And then how can reparations policies be implemented in a way so that Black folks in California can heal and thrive? What are the forms of reparations that you want to see? Lene, hopefully you can hear me. If you can, unmute yourself and let's hear what you got.
Thanks for that, Chris.
Hey.
My name's Lene Norwood. I am a resident living in Fontana, California. I am a 4th generation Californian. My family migrated from the Deep South in the early 1900s to escape Jim Crow, lynchings, other terrorism that was being imposed upon them by white landowners. With that being said, my family has experienced generational harm due to white supremacy and terrorism through mass incarceration, through unfair lending practices and predatory loans, redlining, restrictions on having access to economic opportunities and career opportunities. And not only does my family share this experience, my broader community, I proudly serve as an advocate, activist, and an organizer to help liberate Black people and to help create equity and fairness in our society and in our communities. And a lot of the issues that Black people who have a lineage that goes back to chattel enslavement experience have also been experienced by other Black folks who migrated from different places throughout the diaspora to California and other places of the US in later periods. We all suffer from post-traumatic slavery syndrome, and we still experience post-traumatic slavery syndrome and other forms of PTSD by presently watching daily the murder and terrorism through policing, through mass incarceration. So I am calling for all of us to consider and think about unity and how we can focus and concentrate our forces against the bigger power we need to be fighting, which is the white supremacist construct that means to keep us all divided making sure that we're learning from past movements and not perpetuating those same divisive tactics that are going to keep us all from receiving reparations, but joining arms in unity and understanding that reparations is not a zero-sum game. There are different tiers, there are different ways that we can develop and shape this if we use our imagination and creativity to make sure that we liberate the entire Black community throughout the diaspora, but specifically throughout different nationalities, ethnicities, walks of life, lifestyles, gender identities, etc. So I'm just calling for Black inclusion. I will wrap with saying a little bit about what I hope California will look and feel like for the future. As a mother of a Black son and a Black daughter, I hope that my children and my children's children are able to access opportunities to thrive in their life, that they have access to aspire and achieve their dreams, and that they are able to live in health and safety and in love, regardless of their identity or the color of their skin. So thank you all.
All right. Thank you, Lene. Much appreciated. Again, if you'd like to give your thoughts, your testimony about the ways in which and when and why your Black family came to California, what the harms are, what the repair should look like, and what it actually looks and feels like for your community after reparations, put your hand up and we'll bring you up as a panelist to discuss, to hear what you think. Much appreciated. Lene and Monica. Tariq, I'm bringing you up. Let's hear from you. I'm going to hit promote to panelist, and then you should see option to unmute yourself. Tariq, once you come up, please do unmute yourself and tell us what you think. Hey, Tariq, can you hear us? Let's give Tariq a minute or so here to get set up and get connected. Tariq, as soon as you can hear us, please do jump on in and let us know your thoughts. There you go. Hey, yes, sir.
Hi, Chris. Hi, panelists. First, I just want to thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to speak and having this discussion, because this is history and this is very important. So the first question, when and why did your Black family come to California? My dad was born in Louisiana, and he left to California to have more opportunities to escape a less racially hostile environment. And so why I would like to talk about some of the harms that I've experienced in California as a Black man, and particularly and just kind of express to you guys about those harms. So one of the first harms that I've experienced is basically the school to prison pipeline is very real in California, and I think a lot of people don't understand that. They don't understand how the perception of Black children is in a lot of these public school systems. And I personally, I didn't understand why, like, I didn't understand the system. I didn't understand why my school was under-resourced, why we didn't have access to certain things. I didn't understand why Black children, including myself, were just being overly suspended, and we were just being constantly harassed in this environment in which all we want to do is to see. All we want to do is have access to education, but that's not really there, right? And so that's the first harm that I've experienced, and I've noticed just that harm alone has stripped us from a lot of opportunities in STEM, have taken away a lot of opportunities that could have allowed us to be prosperous. A lot of Black parents, they send their children to school with hopes of better opportunities and a greater future, not fully understanding the system, knowing that that same schoolhouse is really getting them set up for the prison industrial complex. And so going back to the second thing is, I actually went to school in Oakland, I went to a school called Lincoln Child Center in fourth grade. It was a great school. I made a lot of connections, but it brings me into my second point, which is the mass poverty that we have here. Particularly in our Black areas, you see a lot of poverty, which inspires criminal activity. One of the things that I've noticed from just my time in Oakland is the gentrification, which is very real, but not just that, the abuse, the overall abuse of the community. We look at streets like Martin Luther King Boulevard, and those are just a symptom of the problem, you know. And so to me, it just really shows the lack of care, the lack of investment, the lack of um, um, benefits that we have been stripped out of. And we are the wealthiest economy, one of the wealthiest economy in the world. So I think it's really time that I'm glad that we're all together. I think it's really time that we start making some action. We start doing something collectively. And I'm just glad to be here with all like-minded people. And I wish the overall community was in a place where they could appreciate something like this. But I know that it's going to all be worth it once we get those checks. So thank you guys for the hard work, and blessings are on the way. Oh, and shout out to Melanated Podcast. I saw you on Melanated Podcast, so I have to give a shout out to my brother Harrison. But thank you guys.
Thank you, brother. And big shout out to Melanated Podcast. Shout out to Harrison Anderson. Appreciate you for having me on there, bro. Thank you so much. And thank you to Rick. Appreciate you for your thoughts. We're going to bring up our next testifier and get our next testimony. Cynthia Summers, we're going to promote you to panelist. When you see that option, hit yes, and then we're going to ask you to unmute yourself and give us your thoughts, your ideas, your testimony here at our reparations webinar and listening session, which also is right now streaming on YouTube. So again, shout out to the YouTube family. Cynthia, come on.
Yes.
Hey.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, hey.
Awesome. Thank you for taking my call. I got in really late from work, so thank you for extending that. And I like to start out my story. My family all came from Birmingham, Alabama. My mother had 8 children. I was the only one born in California. She fled Jim Crow. We had a dad. All 8 children are by the same dad. He decided to stay. And make a long story short, they went through a divorce. And I was the only one born in California out of 8 kids. And they always talked about this Jim Crow stuff and how it harmed them, how it just was constant harassment. So we ended up in the projects when I was born, Watts, California. And when I look at all the things and the policies and the 13th Amendment, I look at the Jim Crow laws, all those policies, the crime bill, the constant harassment through policy, and how it damaged our spirits, but if it wasn't for, you know, the families, the strong families that we have, African Americans or Native Blacks or Foundation Blacks, I like to call us everything under that umbrella. Had it not been for strong families, we would have definitely, just saw. So we did see a lot of breaking harms and that were done. You know, that 1994 crime bill, I understand that it needed to be done. We get that. But what I would like to see from those harms are names. I mean, our last names alone, when I started thinking about it, brought me to tears a lot of times, that we carry the slave owners' names, Chapman, Summers. Those are all slave owner names. That alone right there. And when you look at other things that harmed us, I'd like to see, as far as reparations, definitely direct cash payments and definitely resources, land and protections. We definitely need to be in that protected class of people. We have been broken so just for so many hundreds of years. The only people that's here in the United States that has been broken like this through policy and through, the enslavement of our people. So to me, the resources with land, a DREAM Act for us, a Black Wall Street in every district of where we reside, or just every state of where I think, we have everything else. We have all sorts of, I will say it, we have Chinatown, we have these other things. So I would like to see that Black Wall Street and land distributed for our homes, protections, put us in a protected class of people. We're the most unique group of people here to the United States of America. And land for businesses, and that's real tangible specifically for us, you know, because of the harms, the Jim Crow, the clause that's in the 13th Amendment, so many other ones, just so many, the Nixon benign neglect policy. I read about that and I'm like, oh my God. So for me, I definitely would like to see that specifically for us. You know, that's a true call to action, that we get the land, we get the to build our businesses on, and education grants, no more loans, you know. That will start the healing process, and a good apology in writing. And let's just, I know we had the Civil War, we had all that great, that was awesome, but after that, that's when I hear that a lot of the harassment began after we became free. So that's what I have. I'd like to see resources and protections and the policies that were put in place to never, ever return. And that, you know, the United States truly keep up with that, keep a promise that was promised to us, that 40 acres and a mule. So, and that's what I have to say. I hope I answered how we came to California. Again, they were from the South, Birmingham, Alabama. Granddad was born in 1903. I got to see him as a little girl from Mississippi. And they were shameful to talk about a lot of stuff. They wanted to just move forward. And I do remember my mother and them having businesses in the 70s and 80s. However, those loans that were given to them, they were pushed out for other groups, you know. And I heard that they were giving them 1% interest loans, whereas theirs were super high. So they had to go back to the workforce. So the businesses were there when I lived in the 70s. When I came out, we had a shoe shine store. We had I will say liquor stores, little grocery stores, cleaners, all of that in that 1 mile radius when we finally did get, and also you know, there was a bill that was for the GI Bill. My stepdad was a beneficiary of that, but that was only from the 70s. So we lost a lot of generational wealth, my mom and them would say, you know, because they would fight in the wars. And again, we fought in every war. If you go back in history, you don't have to go back. The Negro fought in a lot of the wars. And we came home to nothing. Our families, my mom said their families didn't come home to much. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening. And I hope I answered the question that's from my heart.
Yes, you did. Thank you so much. Much
Okay.
appreciated. Thank you so much, Cynthia. You definitely answered the questions.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. No, thank you very much. Let's go to our next testimony here. We're going to bring up Nita. Nita, we're going to bring you up to panelist. So when you hear that or see that button that asks you if you want to be promoted to panelist, please accept your promotion. And when you get up here, please do unmute yourself. And let's see if we can hit that button again. Please do unmute yourself and then let us know what your thoughts are. Again, when and why did your Black family come to California? What are the harms you want California reparations to address? What does repair look like? So what are the forms of reparations that you want? And what does it look like, feel like, sound like, smell like? What does our community look like after reparations? Nita, hey.
Absolutely. Hey, Chris, thank you so much for this awesome listening session and just for the opportunity to present a little testimony. My family moved to California from Arkansas in the early 60s, of course, to escape Jim Crow laws and of course, lack of economic opportunities. And so as a pure reparationist, I would obviously love to see the descendant community, or as in the words of Dr. Lewis, the community of eligibility, repaired and restored after all the harms we've suffered and endured as a result of hate-filled white supremacy policies, written and unspoken. But at the top of my list, and it has been for all the years of my activism, is to repeal that Clinton-Biden 1994 crime bill and end mass incarceration, mandatory minimums, and sentence enhancements. Those sentence enhancements have literally been the death of us, and they're done in courtrooms where there are no cameras, no reporters, and judges just tack time onto our sentences at will. And so I would certainly like that to end. And then also I'd like our people to be released who are locked up for victimless, nonviolent weed offenses, while white men are becoming billionaires in the cannabis and marijuana industry. And with that, I want us to be allowed to enter into the cannabis and hemp industries without having to jump through those hoops and without all of those astronomical fees that they charge for licenses. And so after reparations are distributed, I have no doubt that we will do what we've always done, and that is use our resources to build up our own communities, to gain wealth, and restore ourselves back to what we were before, before situations like, Oklahoma and things like that, the way that we have always tried to build ourselves up and then we get ripped back down. Every time we try to build ourselves up, as so many have already stated, we get kicked back down. And so that's what I imagine will happen after reparations are distributed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nita. Appreciate it, much appreciated. And, also want to just make a special plug here to our YouTube audience. I appreciate y'all. I know y'all watching right now. I know y'all could probably only see the timer on the YouTube live. So if you could on the YouTube live, listen to us, and also share your thoughts about what your responses are to the questions that we've been posing in the YouTube chat. Also, again, when and why did your Black family come to California? YouTube. What are the harms that you want to see reparations address? YouTube. What does reparations look like? What are the forms of reparations that you want? YouTube. And also, what does it look? Okay, so let's snap our fingers. Boom. Now we have reparations. Look out the window. What does our community look like? What do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? Who are you after reparations? Who are we after reparations? I want to bring up our next speaker here, our next testifier here. By the way, before I do that, or as I do that, I'm going to promote our next speaker here to panelists. So when you see that, this is Marcus. When you see that, Marcus, please do hit that yes button and bring yourself up to a panelist. I'm going to ask you to speak. But before I do, just a time check. Folks, we were scheduled to end at 7:30, but we did extend the panel. And so we are going to also extend the community testimony for as many community testimonies as we can get while we have you. And then we're going to end with some calls to actions and some ways that you can submit your testimony and your thoughts and ideas even after we're done here, because the California Reparations Task Force wants to hear from you, not just now, not just tomorrow, but throughout the rest of the task force work, which is going to officially end next year in the summer. So, Marcus, unmute yourself, and what are you thinking?
Hey, everybody, how's it going? So I'll try to be brief and try to be concise. How my family came to California. On my mom's side, my mom actually came to California in the 70s, but on my dad's side, I'm a third generation Californian. They've been here, came here in the 40s. And so what solidified the move to California, they came from Tyler, Texas. And so what solidified the move was on a trip back to Tyler to visit family was there. My grandfather had to wake my dad and my uncles and aunts up in the middle of the night and actually hop in the van and get back to California, because they found out, because of some things that my uncle and my dad, just being kids, what they were doing in Texas, the Klan was coming to lynch them. And so they had to get up and get out of there. And so that's how we got solidified in California. My wife actually, her family's from Compton and Watts, and they go back to the 20s and 30s. So they've been here even longer. But some of the harms I want to talk about that I would like to see addressed, Especially we talk about, we don't like to diminish everything to policing and crime and whatnot. But, you know, in my life, my experience, I grew up in Inglewood and South Central. I've been dealing with police since I was 9 years old, was my first incident with police. And from there, just had several run-ins with Inglewood PD, LAPD, Santa Monica PD for different things, all unsubstantiated, all nothing, just harassment. And so I would like to see something done with that, because how many incidents of nothing have led to either permanent consequences or fatal consequences for people, for our people especially. So I want to see something done with that. Also, the school to prison pipeline. You know, I know that from growing up, there were a lot of kids, especially Black boys, who I saw that got sent to the principal's office, that got suspended, that got kicked out of school altogether. And it was just a matter of maybe they just need to be taught differently. Maybe they'd had a different way of learning that need to be explored. But because of what was going on that we didn't understand, a lot of those kids had their lives altered and ruined and became fodder for the prison system. And I've had family members, as well as good friends of mine, who dealt with mass incarceration. So I want to see something seriously done with the school to prison pipeline. I want it to be mandatory for Black teachers, especially when you have a lot of Black boys, more Black male teachers in classrooms so that they can learn better. Redlining and the freeway acts. Growing up in Inglewood, I know that the freeways here have drastically altered and changed my community. I know there were promenades. You look down Vermont, over in Market Street in Inglewood, not necessarily with freeways, but you see where we had business districts or somewhat business districts that just went away because of how the gentrifying and changing landscape happened to our communities. And so finally, I want to say we're redlining. When it comes to redlining, I think when it comes to anyone who is a African-American descendant, a person enslaved in the United States, if they are a homeowner within the state, I think they need their home immediately revalued and the value of their home bare minimum double. You know, and I say that because my parents bought their house in 1990 and it's barely moved in terms of value compared to a relatively similar area. If you look at Torrance or Culver City, the home value is a third of the value of that. But if you look at the times when they were bought, they were worth relatively the same thing. And now they're a fraction of the value. So I think an immediate influx in the value of descendants' homes needs to happen on day one. What does our community look like? What does California look like day after reparations? I think that with our middle class community, I think it's just smiles and peace. Because if we're all sitting middle class, you know, I grew up, like I said, I grew up in Inglewood and South Central. I was born in 1982. So I was born at the height of guns, drugs, and gangs. So I know what it is. I live in South Central now. So I know what it is with gangs now. And if our community is a pretty much across the board middle class community, then people have a chance and people have an opportunity and don't have to make certain choices. And so if you don't have to make certain choices, there's certain things that don't happen. And so if you have just the ability to just live a better life and you take away things like gangs or whatnot, it's just peace and people just being happy and people just trying to live and truly get the American dream that's been denied to us. So I try to be concise as possible. I hope that answers the question and appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Marcus. Much appreciated. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate that. If you would like to give testimony, we're going to give folks a little bit more time here. If you would like to give testimony, hit that hand raise button, find that hand raise button, hit that hand raise button, and then I'm going to bring you up to give your testimony. We got some other hands coming up, so I'm going to go back to the list here, and also just want to do a quick shout out to our interpreters. Working hard. I see you doing amazing work for folks who are not English speaking or whose English may not be their first language and who speak Spanish. We really appreciate our interpreters, and also for our American Sign Language interpreters as well. Thank you so much. And I want to appreciate everyone who is making use of our interpreters today, one of the objectives of this particular webinar and listening session is to speak to groups who don't normally get talked to about reparations here in the state of California, who may not be Black. That's one of the objectives of this listening session. So again, just want to give a big shout out to our interpreters who are working hard. I see you. Thank you so much. And thank you for sticking on and giving us extra of your time. So, all right, I'm going to bring up our next speaker here, our next testifier. I'm going to promote Nicole to panelist. Nicole, when you see the option to come up as a panelist, please hit the yes button, and then you'll be able to unmute yourself, and then you'll be able to speak and give your testimony about when and why did your Black family come to California? What are the harms you want to see reparations address specifically? What does repair look like? What does reparations actually look like to you? And what does it look like after reparations for our community? Nicole, you should see a button that says promote to panelists. Hit that yes button. If you don't see it, Nicole, no worries. I can allow you to talk anyway, and so you'll be able to speak. Nicole, if you can, unmute yourself and tell us what you're thinking. Nicole, if you can hear us, jump on in and let us know what your thoughts are, and hit that either unmute button or hit the yes button when you're asked to be promoted to a panelist. Either one. We'll give Nicole a couple more seconds here, and then we'll move on to our next speaker. And then we'll try to come back to Nicole if we can't get her in the next few seconds here. So we'll give Nicole a couple more seconds, and then we'll have to come back. So looks like we're gonna have to come back to Nicole. So Nicole, stay where you are. I'm actually gonna open it up now to some of our event co-hosts here to actually give some of their thoughts on specifically the questions that we have posed today for testimony. Looks like Nicole is ready there. Okay, Nicole might be ready. So let's see. Nicole, if you can unmute yourself and give us your testimony.
Hi, this is Gloria. I've been unmuted, but you're saying Nicole.
Okay, yeah, it says Nicole here. I'm sorry, Gloria.
Okay, she gave me the login, so I get it now.
No worries. Yes, Gloria, hey.
Hi, I met you, Chris. Thank you. You spoke to some of us here in San Francisco. I'm on the San Francisco Reparations Committee. And the way my parents came to California is I like to be uplift the people that have no clue. I didn't know my grandparents. I didn't find out who my father was till about 8 years ago, and he had already passed away. So there's harm in that as well, you know, not being able to know that type of information. And then why I want to double down is in San Francisco here, I'm on the subcommittee of reparations for education specifically. And if I was just granted reparations today, what I would like to see is something that me and a group of friends did in Oakland about 10 years ago. We ran a school for about 2 years. And like I said, San Francisco has a lot of Chinese people here. So I grew up with them going to schools on Saturdays. So we decided to open up a Black school in Oakland on Saturdays. And we did drum circles in the morning. We gave everybody new names that fit their personality. And we taught them how to live things, how to write a check, how to balance bills, as long as history from a Black perspective. So what I would love is at the state level that we could get into how education is dictated throughout the counties through the state, because it's so weird to have our boards be elected locally, but the state controls them on what they can and cannot do. So I would like to see that on a state level pushed with a lot of Blackness involved in our students' education. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. Appreciate you, and shout out to Nicole Cunningham of the the San Francisco Reparations Task Force for sharing out the information for today's webinar and listening session. Much appreciated to Nicole. And thank you, Gloria, for your work also with the San Francisco Reparations Task Force. Much appreciated. So as we come to near the end of our broadcast today in our webinar and listening session today, we've extended our panel, and we also have extended our community testimony. So we'll give one more round of testimony, one more shot for folks who want to testify. Please do raise your hand. Looks like some folks are also raising their hand now also. So I'm going to ask that those folks be promoted to panelists. When you see the promotion to panelist option, please do hit that yes button and unmute yourself. I'm going to bring up Nicole. Hey.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I sent that out when I logged in. So thank you for coming in, Gloria. Thank you, everybody who has shared. Thank you, Chris, for putting this together, and those who are assisting you. I love this space. I think it's so important that we have this space to talk about our truths. So I'll be brief. I really don't know. I don't really deal with my family, haven't since 2015. So, and that was before I decided to wake up and learn about us and get activated, if you will. So I really don't know the history of my family at this particular point. If reparations was to be dropped in our back door right now, it would look like feeling safe. It would look like walking down the street and people like waving at us because we're friendly, that we're not a group of people who are animals. We're not, I saw this pastor watering somebody's grass, and police got a call of a suspicious person watering these other people's flowers. It was unbelievable. And it was said, how do we know that that's true? He's like, I got a water hose in my hand. Like, you have to defend the fact that you are watering your neighbor's grass because you look suspicious. So we wouldn't look suspicious. We would look like we belong, right? Healthcare systems, we would have our doctors checking on us. We would be greeted with respect. We would be greeted with humanity. We would be listened to. When our voices, when the camera panned to a white woman who then the police was asking her, she says, yes, our neighbors went out of town. Yeah, and it is likely that he's doing that. Now that this white woman have now co-signed what this Black pastor has said, he was now free to leave after being handcuffed. It would look like we can water grass for our neighbors without having the police called on us. It would look like having enough money to do whatever it is we want to do. It would look like not having to send our kids to white schools so that they can get a quote unquote better education. They would be able to go to the neighborhood schools and already have the better education. I can count my Black teachers on one hand, born and raised in San Francisco, whereas my second husband can count the white teachers on one hand in the South. Okay, well, he was from Tennessee. So it's very different. It would look like we'll be educated by people that look like us, that love us unconditionally. It would look like we would have mental health services in the school where our babies are actually able to deal with the traumas that they don't even know has been put onto them. Right? We should be able to work through the hurts and harms freely and not be at risk of having our kids removed from us because we're expressing how upset we may be. Dealing with our children, all of a sudden CPS is called because you said, I feel like doing X, Y, and Z. You didn't say you was going to do it, but you said you feel like it, and someone interpreted that to say you're going to be violent with your kids. It looked like just being able to exist. A sunny day without any rain on the way. That's what it looked like for reparations, financially, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and every which way we can think of. Thank y'all.
Fire. Thank you, Nicole. Much appreciated. So I'm getting the ping to take us to our close. I still want to hear, I could listen to y'all all, maybe not all night, but a lot longer. So I actually want to. Well, so I'm actually going to stop sharing my, sharing the timer here because we're going to start to wrap us up. And again, thank you so much to everyone who has shared. Thank you so much to everyone who has given their thoughts and their ideas. Thank you so much to our panel, Fire panel, much appreciated. Thank you for your questions, your comments, your thoughts, your feedback, and again, your testimony. I want to say a special thanks to our amazing team here at CJEC, the Coalition for Just and Equitable California, particularly our coalition building team and our coalition building leads, who have been doing an amazing job helping to put this amazing webinar and listening session on. Also want to give a big shout out to the team at Community Health Councils, CHC. I'm talking about Claudia, I'm talking about Gina, I'm talking about Jocelyn, I'm talking about Alejandra, I'm talking about all of our interpreters. I'm talking about every single one who has done such an amazing job with us at CHC, supporting CJEC's work here for the reparations webinar and listening session. Thank you again to everybody who's joined. Also, thank you to the YouTube channel. Before you go, excuse me, the YouTube audience, before you go, I want to give you some calls to action, some things that you can do now. First, as I mentioned, I'm going to cue our team here to put some of these links in the chat. First, visit our website, CJEC Official, and also visit the website of CHC. Okay, learn about what they're doing, learn more about what they're doing in the Los Angeles area and outside of Los Angeles, statewide, also to help people be the best that they can be. So first, make sure you visit those websites. Secondly, though, if you didn't get a chance to give your testimony today, or you weren't comfortable sharing publicly your testimony, that's totally fine, totally fine. You can submit your testimony directly to the California Reparations Task Force in a few different ways. The most important way right now is through the UCLA Bunn Center, through their online California Reparations Testimony portal. So please do submit your testimony to the UCLA Bunn Center directly through to the Bunn Center's online individual California Reparations Testimony portal. That portal is going to close actually on the 31st of this month, so in about a week. So you have 1 week to submit your testimony. Also, please do submit your thoughts and your ideas about reparations via a survey, a California Reparations survey that the UCLA Bunn Center is also using and sharing, and that link should be coming in the chat in a second also. So please do share your thoughts in that survey. That survey is also going to close on August 31st. So make sure you take that survey within the next week. Please do that. You should know that everything and anything that you say will be included in a report that the UCLA Bunn Center is going to present to the California Reparations Task Force no later than, I believe, the end of September. And that report will be released publicly. So please do make sure you submit those surveys. But that's not the only way in which you can submit your thoughts and your ideas to the California Reparations Task Force. Visit the California Reparations Task Force website, www.oag.ca.gov/AB3121. Sign up for the California Reparations newsletter. There's a link to their newsletter on the website, but there's also an email that you can use to email the California Reparations Task Force directly. There's also a phone number that you can leave a voicemail with the California Reparations Task Force also directly. You can speak directly to the Reparations Task Force. That's the point. Lastly, but not leastly, the California Reparations Task Force is going to be meeting again in September. And those meetings and those hearings are going to be public. And so we encourage you to show up to those hearings in person or virtually also, and give your testimony during public comment. The first hour of each hearing is public comment time. So make sure you are there live during the California Reparations Task Force's next meetings to give public comments. The first hour of every single hearing. And guess what? Every single hearing is 2 days long, 8 hours each day. So you actually have 2 public comment opportunities at every single one of the California Reparations Task Force hearings. So be at the next California Reparations Task Force hearings as well. The point is, you don't have to wait. You can talk to the task force now, though. And we encourage you to talk to the task force now and talk directly to task force members now. Again, just to say one more time, please do visit our website, cjecofficial.org. We have a newsletter also that we put out. If you go to our newsletter, if you go to our website and you scroll down, there's a form on the front page that you can use to sign up for our California Reparations newsletter. And also, please do visit the website of CHC, Community Health Councils, as well, and support the work that they are doing. All right. I want to thank everyone who's joined. I want to thank everyone who's here. I want to thank everyone who's watching on YouTube. I want to thank our amazing panelists. I want to give a special thanks also to Dr. Michelle Burton, Deputy CEO of Community Health Councils. Much appreciated. I want to thank again the team at CHC, the entire team, for helping put this event together. I want to thank our community, our coalition building team at CJEC, specifically our coalition building leads. I didn't say your names before, but I'm gonna say them now. Raphael, much appreciated. Kia, much appreciated. Tiffany, much appreciated as well. Thank you so much. And I'll say one more thing, and then I'll let you go. So if you're in the Sacramento area, this Saturday, we are having a reparations listening session in the city of Sacramento. This Saturday, August 27th, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. at Cap City Oak Park, 3810 Broadway and Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in Oak Park, Sacramento. And we want you to be there. So please do join us and show up this Saturday, August 27th, for our next California Reparations Task Force listening session, brought to you by CJEC, our good folks also at the American Redress Coalition of California, the Sacramento team, and ETM Media Group as well. Please do be there this Saturday, August 27th, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m., especially if you're a Black business owner. We're really interested in hearing what Black business owners and Black entrepreneurs have to say about California reparations, but everyone is welcome. And with that, I want to say good night, much love, much appreciation. Thank you for joining, and we will see you next time. Thank you.